I'm Dwayne Goulding. I'm from Johnson County. Been active in the True Texas Project for over a year now. I have the pleasure tonight of introducing our speaker. Our program is the Impeachment of Ken Paxton. And we have an eminently qualified speaker, Bill Zedler, 7th-term representative in the State House. Hey, correct date? 8th term. See, he sneaked that in my mouth. Represents District 96. And I won't go any deeper than that. He's a outspoken conservative leader in Texas, and we're lucky to have him here, and I'm very pleased to introduce him.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. First of all, I want to tell you, Julie, what a great job. You and a lot of the leadership and y'all that are here all the time, y'all are the lions of this work. Every now and then they just call upon me to get the roar a little bit, so I like to do that. And yeah, I served 8 terms, but here's basically what happened. I was first elected in 2002, and so I served the 3, 5, and 7 sessions. And that 2003, was the first time in 130, 50 years that Republicans had taken control of the Texas House. In other words, we'd taken all the statewide offices, we'd taken control of the Senate, but the House was still up for grabs. And so I had the honor of being elected then. And, kind of give you a little other background on me. I first got involved in politics back in 1976 when I heard a presidential candidate who articulated the same views that I did, and that man's name was Ronald Reagan. And I was living in Austin, my wife and I were, and I had a friend of mine. He said, "Who are you supporting for president?" I said, "Well, I'm supporting Ronald Reagan." And he said, "Well, great. Have you ever gone to a precinct convention?" I said, "What's that?" and so he told me. He said, "Listen, why don't you show up at our precinct convention?" And just so happened the Reaganites control that convention. Went on to the senatorial convention, my wife and I did, and we've been going ever since. And that was somebody, and now listen, I knew what I was voting on, but I didn't know all these other intricate deals about how the party ran and that kind of thing. And so I want to tell you that then in 2008, that's when the Obama sweep happened. And they had Acorn working in my area, and there was a senator named Kim Brymer. They were working in both of our areas at precincts that overlapped. And so there were 4,000 brand new straight party Democrat voters that showed up that day. And so it defeated both myself and Kim Brymer. Well, in 2009, I saw the beginning of the Tea Party movement. And I said, you know what? I think the sweep may be going the other way. Now, Kim Brymer, he left. I said, Bill Zedler is going to try it again. And sure enough, I ran and I won. And so then I served the 2011, 13, 15, 17, 19 sessions, and I retired in January 21. But I want to tell you why I'm doing this, because I retired in 2021, and you're like, oh, you old codger, why are you coming back? Well, I'll tell you why. Because what was done on Memorial Day weekend, this last session, was the most dangerous thing that the Texas House could have been involved in, and I'll tell you why. How many of y'all watched it that night? Okay. Well, you can go back and you can actually replay it. All you got to do is go to the House website, and you can play back the video of that night, or you could go to the House Journal, and you can read what happened that night, because they reduced the debate to writing, and they put it in the journal. And so some of the things that I saw were the greatest concerns for me were that, do you happen to know how many other impeachments we've had in Texas in the last 100 and so years? Yeah. 2 other impeachments. One was Paul Ferguson, and the other was an O.P. Perillo. and Paul Ferguson was in 1917, and O.B. Carrillo was in 1975. And I want to tell you, when you start studying it, you see what happened this last Memorial Day weekend. The impeachment process was as different as daylight and dark between what happened then and what happened in 1975 and in 1917. Okay? And so what I think is it's important for you to know some of these facts because, A, it was so bad. Let me tell you, if they end up impeaching Ken Paxton, mark my words, they're going to be back to do it again. Because all they did is this. They threw up a bunch of allegations, and then they pulled the impeachment committee, which was the House General Investigating Committee, together. They hired investigators, and then told the members of the House, oh, here's the information we're going to give you. It was 158 pages. Look at that. And then they came up with 20 counts on the impeachment. And then they said, now, 48 hours later, we're going to have you on the floor of the House, and we're going to debate and present, and debate, and vote on those impeachment proceedings in 4 hours. 4 hours. Let me tell you something, friends. I was in the Texas House for 16 years. And you know what? They never gave us a time limit to do it. And we had to handle some pretty cruddy legislation. And they never said, well, you know, you only got this amount of time to do this legislation. This was the most important legislation that we've had. In other words, I ran in the first time in 2000, there was 20 years. But so I was watching things and stuff like that. I've never seen, this was the most important issue that we had to deal with, and yet they were allocated 4 hours. Now, let me ask you, why do you think they would allocate just 4 hours?
They wanted to put pressure on them.
Well, that's true, but here's the thing. Because what is important, what is the impeachment committee supposed to do? They're supposed to come up with the evidence that they're going to look at it in the Senate to decide whether they're going to actually remove Ken Paxton whoever from office or not. And guess what? If you haven't got anything, then you want it rammed down their throat. Period. And so I want to go over some of these things because here's the thing. Not only do we need to make sure that we put things in place that make sure this never happens again, because let me tell you, they'll be doing it again. Mark my words. And so let me go over a few other things, and then we'll discuss this. And what it boils down to is there were a number of elements that they did in 1917 and in 1975. First of all, in both cases, the House notified the people who were going to be impeached well in advance. They said, listen, we're going to have an impeachment proceeding. You're the person we're going to be looking at. And guess what? We invite you and your attorney to come and sit on the floor. And because all this stuff was done on the floor of the House. It was like a committee of the whole. And so they did that on the floor of the House. It wasn't done by the House General Investigating Committee. All right? Because in essence what happened in this last Memorial Day is the House General Investigating Committee met in March. They said, well, we're going to hire some investigators. Now, where do you think they got the investigators from? Anybody want to take a guess? Well, one of them had just left Merrick Garland's office. It was like they left his office and then they go to the House General Investigating Committee. Another one was hired from Biden DOJ, had left a little bit before that time. Then they went to the House General Investigating Committee. What I want to know is, how much did they pay all these people to do all this investigating? Because they had a total of about 5 investigators. All of them, the rest of them, all came from Harris County, where the DA's office was controlled by the Democrats. So that's where they got the House General Investigating Committee, because you know what? 1917, 1975, every witness was put under oath, under penalty of perjury. You know why? Sometimes people lie. I know you're going to have to find that hard to believe, but sometimes people lie. And so one of the best solutions is you put them under oath under penalty of perjury. Well, when they were asked how many of the witnesses that the investigators went to interview, how many of them were put under oath?
None.
0. Exactly. And then, guess what? After the investigators went and talked to these witnesses, then on the Wednesday before the Memorial Day weekend, they met with the House General Investigating Committee for about 3 hours, and these investigators kind of articulated, editorialized what they found when they talked to some of these witnesses. Okay? And I'm going to show you one of them in just a minute. They didn't put them under oath. Do you know what the law says? The law says that if you come to testify before a committee down there in Austin, you will put under oath. Now, every committee can waive that if they like, except one committee. The House General Investigating. And yet they did not put them under oath. And so, then they articulated this information, and that is what this is. This is 158 pages of what these investigators articulated to the House General Investigating Committee. This is printed out, and then the Thursday, they printed the articles of impeachment. They printed this out, and Thursday, they dropped these on the desk of the members of the House and said, we're going to vote on this on Saturday, 1 o'clock. Okay? Now, here's the other thing. Let me share this with you. Because, how many of y'all have, this is one of the things I found out. How many of y'all have heard that Ken Paxton and this Nate Paul, this businessman that they were supposedly doing all the things with, that Ken Paxton, in return for doing favors for Nate Paul, that Nate Paul had paid for upgrades to the house that Ken Paxton had to have down in Austin. In other words, if you're statewide elected officials, you can live at home sometimes, but you got to have a house in the Travis County area. Okay? So, here's what they said. Wow. You know, Ken Paxton wanted granite countertops in his kitchen down there in Austin. And so, Nate Paul paid for those countertops. And he also paid for some other renovations to the house. Okay? Now, how do we know that? Well, because the House General Investigating Committee had one of the investigators. This is what they told the House General Investigating Committee. Listen to this closely. An OAG employee, Office of Attorney General, an OAG employee was present for at least 2 conversations in which General Paxton indicated that he would like upgrades to the house. One conversation was specific to granite countertops. General Paxton realized that now Senator Angela Paxton, his wife, did not like the counters and wanted the change. The contractor advised that the upgrades would be $20,000. General Paxton indicates that he would like to proceed, and the contractor, according to the employee, their response was, I'll have to check with Nate. Okay? Any of y'all ever heard that story? Listen, I was at one event, and I had a Republican, somebody that worked in the Republican Party last year. Well, everybody knows that's true. So, anyhow, now let me ask you this. Whose name did they mention there? Nate, and they had mentioned Ken Paxton. But who was the OAG employee? We don't know. And who was the contractor? We don't know. Do you know what this is called?
Hearsay.
Amen. It's called hearsay. In fact, it's not just hearsay, it's hearsay upon hearsay upon hearsay. And, but, from that is where they got one of the counts for the impeachment. This is it. So, and here's the problem. When you read through this is what you find. Over and over and over again, this is what they call evidence. Now, I call it unfounded or unsubstantiated allegations. Okay? Unsubstantiated allegations. But that's what the 20 counts of impeachment were all based on. Whereas, in 1917 and 1975, when they had the impeachments there, it was all done on the floor of the House, and not only could the House members listen to it, but the public could listen to it. Okay? You know who heard this? Nobody other than the House General Investigating Committee. Right? Now, so that was one of the big differences. That they were put under oath before, they weren't put under oath this time. It was done on the floor of the House. Not the case here. Here was the other thing. Before, O.P. Carrillo and Paul Ferguson, if they wanted to have their attorneys ask questions, they could. Now, they couldn't do it in the normal trial format, I guess, but they could send a question to the speaker and the witness could be asked a question. The other thing is, if they had any exculpatory information, that could also be presented. Do you know that when they had this meeting, where the House General Investigating Committee had heard this, Paxton had heard about it. So he sends one of his attorneys over there and asks to present some information that could be exculpatory information. The House General Investigating Committee refused to hear it. And they refused to accept the evidence that they were presenting. Now, let me ask you this. How many of y'all heard Paxton's attorneys when they had the press release before they did it at the Texas GOP headquarters? Did anybody hear that? Well, the old Texas GOP headquarters, pull it down and watch it. It's maybe 20 or 30 minutes. Okay. Well, they had a couple of slides there. Because I want to tell you, in those two slides, they had more evidence than 158 pages of evidence. Because, guess what one of the slides was? One of the slides was the kitchen countertops.
They're not granite.
And yeah, and guess what? They ain't granted. And then the next slide was receipts and checks. Receipts made out to Ken Paxton. Checks signed by Ken Paxton for other renovations. Now, here's that thing. The House General Investigating Committee could have gotten that information anytime they wanted. But the investigators, they didn't go ask Ken Paxton. Now, they talked to this guy that was the OAG employee, but they didn't talk to Ken Paxton. They didn't talk to anybody else. And that's the problem. And so, when you see things like that, then you say, okay, friends, there's some real problems. Because, let me share with you one other thing. How many of y'all know who the parliamentarian of the House is? Well, have you ever watched what's going on? You got the speaker, and right beside the speaker's left-hand side, there's somebody standing there with him, or they may be sitting. But a lot of times, the speaker's going, and this person's talking, okay? And if you know what's going on, you see that a lot of times the speaker is simply repeating what that person tells him. Well, that's the House Parliamentarian. Now, do you know where they got the House Parliamentarian? Well, he was an Obama attorney.
Oh, no.
So, man, let me ask you this. Could it be that maybe some kind of deal was cut? You know, you give us your support, and we'll have the parliamentarian be a Democrat. Then we'll have Democrats hired by the House General Investigating Committee. Do you know that now that they got the impeachment going in the Senate, I think they've got 14 or 15 lawyers. Each one of those lawyers will be paid $500 an hour. And I remember one of the top attorneys that they had down there, they said,
Let me guess, that's coming from the general fund, right?
well, hey, yeah. Now, let me add one other thing. The House General Investigating Committee said they had to investigate General Paxton. Do you know why? There was a lawsuit that was being settled, and in other words, they said, we can either pay $3 million now, or we can risk going to court, and when we go to court, it could be $10 million, it could be $15 million, $20 million. When you go to court, sometimes that happens. And so, anything over $250,000, they got to go to the Appropriations Committee, and they got to ask for the money. Well, Paxton was there, but he didn't ask for the money. It was one of his lieutenants, because a lot of people don't know this. Do you know who the lawsuit involved? I bet you think, but it was Ken Paxton, right? No, it wasn't. It was the Attorney General's office, not Ken Paxton. And they have a team of lawyers that this is all they do. They handle this litigation where employees have left or whatever, and they get mad and they sue. And there's about somewhere around 100 cases going on. Okay? Just like this one. And what it boils down to is that they had to go before the House the Appropriations Committee, ask for the money. But you know what? When the House General Investigating Committee got put forward, well, we had to do this because he asked for the money. I said, listen, how long do you have to been around there to say, no, he didn't? All you had to do is say, no. We're not going to give you the money. How much did that cost? $0. But you know what? We hadn't found out how much it costs to hire all these investigators sitting around, and they're still on the payroll. Okay, that's still going on because but that's the case. I said, what are you doing? Because that bill came out of the Appropriations Committee without any money in it. The lawsuit that in March. You know what? That was about the time they hired it. Yeah, I think so. So, anyhow, it's amazing after you've been around a while, you find it's not so bad. And then, got on the floor of the House, and anybody know who John Smithy is? Mm-hmm. John Smithy. John Smithy is a representative from Amarillo. Been in the House for years. Okay? Long-term, respected state representative. And John Smithy is an attorney. Because I'm going to tell you, I'm not an attorney, all right? I'm a medical supply secretary. And so anyhow, well, you know, Zedler, he doesn't know anything. Okay. But John Smithy, he's an attorney. Here's what John Smithy said. Because he said, I'm going to tell you, I'm not here defending Ken Paxton, but I'll tell you this. This impeachment process is wrong. He said, not one fact witness who knew anything about anything was examined by the committee. From the record that I've been able to uncover, and I've confirmed this with Chairman Murray, they were not even required to sign witnesses' affirmation. What we've heard and what's in the report is not one shred, listen to this, not one shred of evidence. It's hearsay, and that's the whole purpose of the House committee, is to generate evidence to send to the Senate. And he said, there was no evidence. It's hearsay upon hearsay upon hearsay. And he said, oh, here was the other one. They mentioned about, this was done in 4 hours. The previous one where they impeached O.P. Carrillo, 70 hours of testimony. 70 hours. They accumulated 15 volumes of testimony and 170 documents and evidence. Again, does that look like 70 volumes? And so he said, I would just say this. If I'm ever going to be part of any impeachment proceeding that actually results in the impeachment of an officer, I don't want it to look like a Saturday mob out on an afternoon lynching. Because let me tell you, that's what it looked like. Tony Tenderholt, who was one of the other state reps down there, he said, we were given 4 hours to discuss this. He said, we spent more time on the tampon tax relief. Y'all hear that? Yeah, remember that. Okay. And so, those are the issues you start seeing. How they handle these other 2 impeachments and the way they handle this one. Evidence? No evidence. They took a long time to deliver it, 4 hours. Because here's the thing. There were 20 articles of impeachment. Do you know it went so fast, they didn't really get a chance to really discuss each article. Not only that, but the vote was all yes or all no. Because they didn't take the time to separate the articles of impeachment in order to vote on. Now, the let me see. I think it's important to point out that as we go through these and you look at these various articles, that I can remember, let me read one of them because it really hurt me. One of the articles of impeachment was the fact that Ken Paxton had been involved in one of the cases, and they said why he prolonged the litigation so that people would not know about these what was going on in the case. Now, this was a deal where Ken Paxton said, got somebody interested in the business. He had some relationship with the business. And what they said was, he was supposed to have told the people that he had an involvement with the business. And, but he didn't. And so, they said, that's a punishment. Well, they had that come up administratively, and there was an administrative penalty to it of $1,000. And in the past, that particular issue has always been handled administratively. But all of a sudden, this particular case, they said, well, we're going to make a criminal case out of it. Y'all ever heard of people doing that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see what's going on right now with Donald Trump? Mm-hmm. A lot of that is exactly that. These are cases where that were handled administratively in the past, and all of a sudden, now they want to make a criminal case out of it. And so, I remember when that was going on, because this started right when about the time that Ken Paxton was first running for Attorney General. And I said to myself, are you kidding? We all knew about it. In fact, that was one of the issues that came up during the campaign. You know, during the campaign, well, listen, all this other stuff he's been doing, he's done this, he's done that. That all came up during the campaign. And I said, it also had come up previously. And so, what the deal was, they were wanting to punish him because they said he delayed the process so it would keep the information from getting to the public. When that wasn't the case. Public, well, you know well about it. And so, but that's what they've done through this entire process. They've tried to either A, criminalize something like that, when, guess what? One of the things that Ken Paxton's attorney said, let me tell you something. Well, one of them was the attorney that was representing him in that insurance case. And he said, the other side extended the litigation far more than we did. So the other side, and that's all right for them to extend it, but it's not all right for Ken Paxton. You know, sometimes you do get extensions in these, litigations. And it's not just to try and keep the information from the public. Because believe me, the news media is more than happy to get that information out. Let me ask you this. Have you heard the newest thing that they came out with? The newest thing they came out with, do you realize that Nate Paul got an Uber car? And Nate Paul allowed Ken Paxton to use his Uber car. And I remember Chan Lake coming with it and talking about why. Nate Paul allowed Ken Paxton to use his Uber card so that they wouldn't know what he was doing. And I said, please tell me the crime. Okay, please tell me the crime. Now, I don't know if you said, now maybe he was taking an Uber to Houston, or maybe he was taking an Uber to, San Diego or something. Most of those Ubers, you're $5-10 or something, maybe 20. But I said, you know what? That ain't a whole lot of money. But that's the other thing, though. If you listen to the House General Investigating Committee and the attorneys for the House, one of the things that had come up a couple of times was this. Now, we're not saying there's a crime here. Wait a minute. You're not saying there's a crime here? Because I'll tell you, one of the problems with a lot of this is there's no specificity in the Texas Constitution. There's no specificity as to how they run the impeachment process in the House. And there's no specificity on what you have to be found guilty of in order to be removed from office. All right? Because I'll tell you this. I believe what they're shooting for is to say, well, now listen, this isn't a crime, but after all, it's, he's a stinker, or something like that. Because my point is, what is it for, if you're a president,
What do they got to find you guilty of if you're the president?
High crimes and misdemeanors.
High crimes and misdemeanors. Those are crimes.
Now, why is it that you would avoid wanting to say the word crime?
Pardon? Well, yeah, I mean, that part, but the deal is,
When you have crimes on the books and dealing with the law, and you have a crime, there's specificity as to what they have to prove in